Welcome to the Daily Rebel, Saturday bonus edition, for men who are done playing games with their faith and ready to live it for real. No excuses, no hiding, no fluff, just truth that hits your life where it actually counts. Because your faith isn't proven by what you say, it's proven by how you show up and live. So step up, man. Let's lock in and let's get to work. Yo, what is up, man? Here we go. We're closing out the part where we talk about dedication. So we've talked about David for this first half of the summer. We've talked about his devotion. We've talked about his discipline and dependence. And today we're talking about dedication, living for something bigger than yourself. Listen, a dedicated man doesn't give God part of his life. He gives God all of it. What you are devoted to determines who you become. So most men dedicate themselves to a career. Maybe it's a hobby, a sport, relationship, money, success, you name it. The question isn't, are you dedicated? The question is, what are you dedicated to? Because whatever captures your heart will eventually direct your life. And when we go to the end of David's story, we find a man who has experienced victory. He's experienced failure, restoration, success, and some heartbreak, but even blessing. And after all of it, his heart still belongs to the Lord. If you have a Bible, go to 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 3. It says, "Because of my delight in the house of my God, I now give my personal treasures of gold and silver to the house of my God." Notice something. David doesn't say, "I have to." He says, "I delight." His dedication flowed from affection and not obligation. So let me get out some points. Number one, dedication reveals what you treasure. So Jesus would later say, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. David's resources followed his devotion because what matters most to you eventually receives the best of you. So think about your time. Where does your attention go to? Where do you put your time, effort, energy, focus, and resources? Because everything flows toward what you treasure. And I don't know what it is you treasure. My prayer it is the gospel, because the gospel, the good news that Jesus rules and reigns because of his life, death, and resurrection, should be the thing and the treasure that you have most, that you love most, because that's where everything goes, where it should go. And so what receives the best of your attention? Because that's usually what has your heart. Your life follows your loves. Number two is dedication requires sacrifice. You see, David didn't just give his leftovers. He gave personally, sacrificially, generously. Comfort and commitment rarely live in the same house. Listen, every meaningful calling requires sacrifice. A godly marriage is going to require sacrifice. A strong family is going to require sacrifice. Spiritual growth, leadership. Dedication requires sacrifice. I want you to understand, and I hear this all the time. I've got people and some of my wife's friends that tell me how much their husbands are not there to continue to establish a relationship with the kid that they brought into this world. Dads who show up after a long day at work and tell the wife that, hey, I know it's been a hard day with the kid, but I've also been at work. I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go do. And it's like, bro, you're clocking out of your job, but now you got to go be dad. You got to go be husband. It requires sacrifice. It's going to require finding the energy to be who God's called you to be if you want it to grow. None of it happens accidentally. Get up off the couch. Go wash the dishes. Get up out of your car, go into the house, and be the greatest husband and dad you can be. It's going to take some sacrifice. But you will never drift into becoming a godly man that he created you to be. What's your next step of obedience requiring? Because number three is dedication builds a legacy. One of the most remarkable things about this chapter is that David is preparing for something he will never personally complete. The temple would be built by his son Solomon, not David. Yet David pours himself into it anyway. Why? Because dedicated men live for something bigger than themselves. David understood that life is not about making your name great. It's about making God's name great. Immature men ask, what can I get? Mature men ask, what can I leave behind for the next generation? So are you building something that will outlive you? So listen, David ultimately points us to Jesus. Here's why. Because Jesus was perfectly dedicated to the Father's will. And even when it cost him something, even when it led him to the cross, you see, Jesus didn't merely give resources. He gave himself, his life, his blood, his body, and his sacrifice so that we could be redeemed. That's the example you follow. That's the example you follow. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 says, be imitators of God. So his life, his body, his blood, his sacrifice, so that we could be redeemed. He gave it all. He's all in. The cross is the greatest display of dedication the world has ever seen. So if you're going to model any man in this life, If you're going to model any man of dedication in this life, even go outside of David, because he points to the true and greater David, which is Jesus. Again, the cross is the greatest display of dedication the world has ever seen. Listen, you see, David, he killed giants, lions. He defeated armies. I mean, he had some of the greatest conquering record of I believe any king in the Old Testament. He ruled a kingdom. But listen, what made David different wasn't his talent. It was his dedication. His heart belonged to the Lord. And at the end of his life, that's what mattered most. Because listen, y'all, we need to understand as men, a life dedicated to God is never a life wasted. So men, for this whole month of June, I just want to remind you that God has called you as a man to live disciplined. Remember, discipline is making decisions against yourself. He's called you to be dependent. That when David walked onto the field against the giant, he didn't win because he was skilled. He won because he was 100% dependent upon God, because 100% of the time without the Lord, David loses to Goliath. He was also devoted. Remember, the one thing that he wanted was to dwell in the house of the Lord. And he was also dedicated. He was a man that desired to build a legacy. And even though he was a fallen man, he kept going towards the Lord. He knew it required sacrifice. He would give it all away. Solomon would be the one to build the temple. And even though David himself would be a name that would echo, probably greater than every name outside of Jesus, he showed us where his heart eventually was always led, and that was always to the treasure of the Lord. So as we go into July, as we talk about what it really means to be a man of dedication, discipline, devotion, and discipline. As we go into July, I want you to take those 4 disciplines, work on them, and as we walk into the life of Daniel in July, I just want you to pursue that one thing, and that one thing is Jesus. Men, I love you, and we'll see you next week as we kick off July, the summer of Daniel and David and Daniel, and this is part 2. Let's look at 4 virtues of Daniel, the one who was captured and indoctrinated into the Babylonian system but still stood on his convictions. Love you, men. Let's go live it. That's your Daily Rebel Saturday edition for the men. Now go live it. Lead yourself well. Don't keep it to yourself, because Redeemed Rebels, we don't just profess faith, we prove it. If you want to equip other men and grow their faith, share this with them, leave a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time on the Saturday bonus edition of the Daily Rebel for Men.